Now we're in the book of Mark. Same verses, same church. One of the religious scholars who had listened to them debating and observed how well Jesus had answered them now came up and put a question to him. Which is the foremost of all the commandments? Jesus replied, this is the foremost. Hear, O Israel, God, our God, is one. You must love the Most High God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this, you must love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. The scholars said to Jesus, well spoken, teacher. What you have said is true. The Most High is one, and there is no other. To love God with all your heart, with all your understanding and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. This is far more important than any burnt offering or sacrifice. Jesus, seeing how wisely the scholar had spoken, said, you are not far from the kingdom of God, and therefore no one dared to question Jesus anymore.
You did good on there.
Would you pray with me? Holy One, as we take a deep breath and we breathe in the wonderful energy out here, let it fill us. Let it fill our cups. Let this time fill our cups so we have something to pour out. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of each of our hearts be filled with your light, your love, and your wisdom. Amen. You know, my sermon has to be sitting next to me even if I don't look at it because it's like a superstitious thing. So love your neighbor as yourself. We've heard it, we all know the phrase. I don't know why it is, we tend to miss the second half of that phrase a lot. And religion especially seems to emphasize loving your neighbor, being good to other people, helping other people, forgiving other people, being compassionate to other people. And we tend to forget the part that says we have to love ourselves first. So I gave you a whole little insert. Don't look at it. I got the collective downward look. You can take that home and look at that because I thought it was kind of a neat list of ways that we don't always think about to love ourselves. So you can take that home and look at it. I still think it skips a few pieces. A lot of the articles that I read tended to not talk about spirituality as part of a way to care for yourself. And you kind of have to ask, so why does Jesus even say this whole love your neighbor as yourself? It's the second greatest commandment next to, love God and love your neighbor as yourself. It's actually out of the Old Testament. Yeah, we all tend to kind of give Leviticus a bad rap because there's all kinds of really crazy stuff in Leviticus. But it's in the book of Leviticus 19. And so it's a tried and true kind of rule that says it's important to care for ourselves as part of our spiritual practice. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. Even the concept of self-care is the definition can be disagreed upon. So let's agree upon, perhaps, or at least agree with me, or let me put forth what I want you to know about self-care, and you can choose to take it or not. So let me start with what self-care is not. Self-care is not selfish, first of all. It's not narcissistic. It's not self-centered, and it's not about me eating Cop's ice cream every day, even though I love it. And it's not about being able to say whatever I want and do whatever I want and acquire whatever I want. It's not about well, I don't feel like getting up and going to church and preaching this morning. That's not self-care. It doesn't mean I get to shirk my responsibilities. I don't get to step on anybody else. It also doesn't mean, and this is a tricky one, so stay with me, it doesn't mean self-improvement if your self-improvement is because you've decided you hate something about yourself, or you're not perfect enough. It's good to want to improve yourself, but it shouldn't be because you're beating yourself up about it. Do you know what I'm saying? Because that kind of defeats the self-love piece. I love myself, so I'm going to beat myself up about this so I'll be better. Doesn't work in my head. It's more like, I love myself. I want to be a better person. I love my body. I want to be healthier, and so therefore, I'm going to care for myself. There must be really good birds going on here. Baby birds. They're feeding the baby birds. Sorry, everybody on Zoom, you can't see the baby birds. So, given all that, give me an example of self-care. Maybe something you do for self-care. Nobody here does any self-care or has any clue what that means. Jerry?
Journal.
Journal. Good for you.
Meditation.
Meditation. Okay?
Exercise.
Teresa says exercise. Good. Clarice?
Sit on a patio and look at the trees.
Sit on a patio and look at the trees. Yes.
Read something that doesn't require concentration.
Yes. Read something that is not for work or require concentration. Yes. Sue says.
Get enough rest.
Get enough rest. Marilyn?
Listen to my favorite music.
Listen to your favorite music. Absolutely. Anybody on Zoom want to jump in?
Eat your vegetables.
Eat your vegetables. I think that was Becky? Thanks, Becky. You taught her well, Bev. Good job. Anyone else?
Spend time with people you love.
Spend time with people you love. Good.
Massage.
A massage. Ooh. Yes, very nice. Anyone else? Time away from the kids, maybe. Reiki. Good. Okay, so you were going to say something, Kurt? No. It was just that slight move of the hand that threw me off. Sorry. So there are lots of numbing behaviors that are sometimes considered to be self-care. Because we think about self-care as, well, it's something to make us feel better, right? And so sometimes things that numb us make us feel better for a little while. But they won't in the long run. So I was reading an article that suggested that we look at this a different way. It says if you can't tell the difference between a behavior that is trying to numb you so you feel better and a behavior that is actually for self-care, that you think about it the next morning. If when you wake up the next morning what you did the night before still makes you feel better, then it was probably self-care. If you wake up thinking, oh gosh, yeah, I really didn't need that extra glass of wine or that second dessert, it was probably not in self-care. It was probably more about numbing. So there's a paradox in our country, which says that, so Google Trends tracks like the trends of searches, right? So since 2015, the number of Google searches on self-care has more than doubled. And there's a doctor of psychology by the name of Paula Lopez who said that basically there's an epidemic of anxiety and depression in our country, that everybody experiences some of this. So we have so much stress and so much anxiety and so much tension and so much sadness and depression and so many people searching for a way to feel better, searching for some self-care help. And yet, there's a Harris poll that was done that says that lots and lots of people do not make self-care a priority at all. In part because of two reasons. So 44% of people surveyed said that self-care was impossible unless you had enough time. And 35% of people said that self-care is impossible unless you have enough money to like get a massage or something. Which, you know, if you start with that mindset, then you can just throw it out the window and just give up. It doesn't take a lot of time necessarily. It doesn't take a lot of money necessarily to care for ourselves. You know, when I was in seminary, they were very clear that sort of a good luck if you think you're going to get a full day off somewhere along the line. So you need to learn to take chunks of time and block them off. To put, you know, X's in a couple hours here and there, wherever you can find it. To claim an afternoon, if you have to just claim an afternoon. Because the nature of the job is such that it's really hard to get chunks of time, days, entire days off. Even 15 minutes. Any of us can manage. I can walk a mile in 15 minutes. I can walk around my backyard and look at the flowers and feel refreshed in 5 minutes. You know, the little things that we can do, and it doesn't have to take a lot of money. You know, calling a friend, whoever said connecting with your friends, doesn't take any money. Or meditating for a few minutes. Or sitting under a tree looking at the leaves for a few minutes. A lot of the things that you mentioned don't take money. They just take a moment to be self-aware enough to recognize that, geez, I'm feeling a little stressed. And I'm getting a little cranky. And the people around me better look out unless I take a little time for self-care so I can get grounded and centered and just feel better, period. To fill up our cups, like I said to the kids, to take a moment to fill up our cups before we have to pour it out again. Because the nature of being an adult is that we pour out, and we pour out, and we pour out. Whether it's our jobs, or our parents, or our kids, or our friends and our neighbors or whoever, it's all good. It's not bad to pour out. But if you're trying to give something you don't have, you're going to burn out. Our society, sadly, does not, even though so many people want to do self-care and so many people need self-care is really not looked at very highly in our society. We should be able to push through everything. We should be able to take on everything. How many of you have been following the news about the professional tennis player Naomi Osaka in the last year? So a few of you. So she's the second-ranked women's tennis player in the world. The French Open was the end of May, and she won the first round of the French Open. Before she had even started to play, she had sent a note to the head of the tournament to say that she was not going to be doing her mandatory press conference after her round because she suffers with anxiety and depression. And she said in Paris she was already feeling very vulnerable and very anxious, and speaking to the world press just brings on a wave of anxiety for her. And she chose, in her public statement, she said she chose a path of self-care. She chose a path for herself, and she preemptively informed folks that she would talk to the press afterwards. But she couldn't do it during because she was suffering for it. Well, her plea fell on deaf ears, and she was fined $15,000 for missing that press conference after that first round. In addition to that, ESPN reported that the governing bodies or whoever they are of all the 4 Grand Slam tennis tournaments warned her that she would either be fined more or suspended or expulsed, is that a word, from those tournaments if she did not fulfill press obligations that they wanted her to fulfill. Nobody was willing to work with her on any of it. So of course she got more media attention than she wanted after all of it, and withdrew from the French Open after winning that first round. And as of this last week, she withdrew from a kind of warm-up tournament for Wimbledon that was to be held, or is being held, in Berlin. So her attempt at self-care sets shows the rest of us what the world thinks of self-care. And dealing with a mental illness, dealing with any sort of struggle. That it's not acceptable, basically. And I give her a heck of a lot of credit for being brave enough to be vulnerable enough to share her struggles with depression and anxiety, and to risk the backlash that she did receive, to risk doing all of it just so she could care for herself. So having said all of that, I'm inviting all of us to a commitment to loving ourselves through self-care. And I'm not asking you to revamp your entire lives. I'm asking you to choose one thing, maybe even one tiny little thing that you can do in one of 5 areas, okay, this next week. And then if that goes well, hey, maybe you can try something else. Physical, social, spiritual, mental, emotional. What can you do physically to improve your health? Is there a doctor appointment or a dentist appointment, or an eye appointment, or some appointment you should have made that you have not made? Can you walk around the block once a day, get a little bit of exercise? Can you eat a little bit less or drink a little bit less of something you shouldn't be eating or drinking? Get a little more sleep. Go to bed a little earlier. It's not rocket science. It's just about paying attention to our bodies. I mean, we wear our bodies out in our lives. They serve us well. We should be patting them on the back and loving them the best we can, putting on some nice smelly good lotion or whatever, and being grateful to our bodies on a daily basis for what they do for us. Despite my, wrinkly skin and whatever else is going on, my failing eyesight, still grateful. Social. It's been proven that the better our connection with other people, with friends and with family, the healthier we will be emotionally, spiritually, physically. So, what friendship have you neglected that you would like to rejuvenate? Who haven't you seen in the last year and a half because you couldn't? Make a phone call. Set a date for coffee. And don't ignore the person that you live with, either. Or another significant other. Do something romantic. Go out for dinner. Spend some quality time together in some way, shape, or form. We take each other for granted way too much, and we need to nurture those relationships. Mental. Do something that stimulates your brain. Watching cartoons this morning, Tony probably wasn't going to do it. We're keeping him from his cartoons, I'm afraid. Doing puzzles, brain puzzles. Doing something new. Try something new. That's the neurologist said that's the best thing you can do is to challenge your brain, do new things. Go somewhere new, see something new. Or do something creative. Art, or poetry, or taping labels to bottles after the service. Anything fun. Art, music, all those creative things. Things that stimulate your brain. Music. Did I say that? I probably said that. Spiritual. Our spirituality grounds everything. It brings meaning to our lives. It brings purpose to our lives. And so the question for you to ask yourself is, am I being spiritually fulfilled? And if not, here's a shocker, that's not my job. I might be able to help, and hopefully the band helps, and hopefully you find a little bit here, but your spiritual fulfillment is your path. And if it's not being fulfilled here, then, what is it? You need a spiritual director nature? Do you need to try yoga or Tai Chi? Do you need to read some spiritual material? Do you need to go sit under a tree and just enjoy nature and soak up the energy? What do you need to be spiritually fulfilled? And if you struggle with that question, come see me. I'm not going to fix it for you, but I might help you find a way. And then emotionally. We need to be emotionally supported. So where do you find your emotional support? Maybe it's in journaling. I don't know if that's how Jerry uses his journaling, but I do that sometimes. I pour out whatever I need to pour out so I'm not dumping on Julie or somebody else. But to make sure that we've got those people in our lives who will support us and love us and listen to us and help us to process what's going on with us. Or find a therapist if that's what you need, that emotional support. Sometimes it's exercise, physical exercise that gets the stress out. I used to, when I was young, I used to play a lot of racquetball. Hitting a little blue ball as hard as you can is really good stress relief. But there are still ways to do that. So, self-care. It increases our longevity, it increases our immune system, it increases our smiling capability. It makes our relationships better. Really, there's nothing about it that's bad at all. Make yourself a commitment to do one little thing this week for self-care. And if you need an excuse for it, you say it's because Kaye told me to.
I'm going to remind you of that.
I know you will. That will come back to bite me. But I can remind her at the same time. So, that's it. Amen.